Welcome to today's lesson called How to Write an Article. An article is a very broad definition for a text. Articles can be written in many different ways and for different purposes. They might be informative, entertaining, criticizing, or celebratory, to name a few. This lesson aims to guide you through some steps in order to produce a well-written article. If you're a student of mine, you can find many of these tips in your Pick and Mix workbook. Pick and Mix workbook on the page 101. The first thing that you need to do is choose a topic. And if you've been given free reins, if the assignment is just write an article, it might be good to start broad and then narrow it down. So just for the sake of having an example, let's say we choose music. That's a very broad topic, so how about we make a little mind map to narrow it down? What do we associate with music? There's listening to music, obviously. You might also think about playing instruments and singing and dancing. Maybe you think of a certain music artist or the music industry. There's really a lot here that you could pick from. Let's say now that we're interested in playing instruments, so you decide to go with that. Now we could continue to narrow down with another mind map, or we could start asking questions. It's always good to have one or two questions in mind when writing an article. It'll help you to stay on track. Now let's say you already know a bit about this topic. It's always good to pick a topic that you're interested in and maybe already know something about. Then you have something to build on. Let's say you've heard that playing an instrument can help your brain develop. So you ask the question, how can playing an instrument be good for the brain? That's a pretty good research question to start off with. Now we can start getting somewhere. Now you need to research and gather information. As you know, the internet is a great source of information, but remember to be source critical here, since anyone can write anything on the internet. So make sure to check where your information comes from. But don't forget also your local library is always available. There you don't have to think about source criticism as much. The library may provide you with books and as well as magazine and newspaper articles. Depending on what type of article you're writing, you may also want to make personal interviews. Maybe not the best approach for this example topic, but for another one it could be good. Had you, for example, chosen instead to write about listening to music, you might have settled on the question, does listening to music make you study more efficiently? And for that question, it might have been a good idea to interview some of your fellow students about their own experiences and then compare that to research that you found. But let's stick to this example about how playing instruments can be good for the brain. While you do your research, remember to take notes always and save your sources so you don't have to go look for them again. And then you can later tell where your information comes from. And also write down page numbers whenever that's possible if you're writing from, if you're using an article that's been printed or a book that has page numbers, always write down the page number so don't have to go look for it again if you need to. And then once you have a bunch of notes, you need to start organizing them. Everyone has their own way of doing this. There's no one right way. Maybe you already have a way that works very well for you. If you want some tips, me personally, I like to have most of my notes in the form of quotes. Just copy and paste directly from the source, and then I'll paraphrase later as I'm writing. Because remember, you need to write in your own words, or you'll be found guilty of plagiarism. I am also a huge fan of color coding. My notes when I'm preparing to write a paper will look something like this. I'll go through my notes and highlight bits of the text with different colors depending on what they're about. And the more you practice, the better you'll get, and you'll find what works for you. Something I strongly recommend, however, is using subheadings. If you're writing a longer article, you may want to include subheadings in your article. But even if you don't have subheadings in the final product, it's still a very good idea to have them during your writing process because it'll help you to stay on track. So let's say we've done our research for how playing instrument can be good for the brain, and let's say we've settled on the subheadings increased learning, improved motor skills, mental health benefits, and memory. If it were me, I'd have one color for each of these and color code my notes accordingly. Then all that's left to do is write your article. Now, an article should always start with an introduction that catches the reader's interest, and the subheadings will then make up the main body of the article. Remember to use paragraphing, meaning you start a new line whenever you start a new topic. Depending on how long your article will be, each subheading could make up one paragraph, or in a longer text there can be several paragraphs beneath each subheading. That might be when you actually want to include the subheadings in the paper and not remove them for the final product. Then at the end you have one paragraph that sums up what you've said, called a conclusion. A tip is to start by writing the main body. Since both the conclusion and the introduction will be summarizing and highlighting the most important and interesting parts of your article, it will be hard to write either of them before you properly know what the article will be about. So start with the body text and then move onto introduction and conclusion once you know what you've actually written. Now, something you should probably consider even before you start researching your topic is what type of article are you writing? Is it going to be informative, critical, or is it going to be something else? You should keep this in mind all the time throughout your work, and like I said, you should probably think about it as soon as you've settled on your topic. But you may also change approach once your research is done, depending on what you find and learn. So keep an open mind. What you also need to consider every time you write something is, who are you writing for? Are you writing for your teacher? For your classmates? Perhaps you're going to read and give feedback to each other's text. Your teacher may have instructed you to imagine that you write for a specific audience. Think about how you will adapt the language depending on your audience. Should it be funny, challenging, professional? Can you use certain specific terms, or do you need to assume that your audience need you to explain them? Now then, to summarize what we've gone through, how to write an article. First, decide on a topic and narrow it down. Phrase one or two questions to keep you on track. And then decide what type of article are you going to write. Informative, entertaining, critical, or something else. Start your research, take notes, write down your sources and page numbers if you can. Then organize your notes, use subheadings to help you organize the notes, and create an outline for your paper or your article. And then you write, and consider your audience. Always keep that in mind. Who are you writing for? What language can you use? And finally, when you're done, read through what you've written. Check for typos and other types of mistakes. And also check structure. Do you have a good structure? Does it follow a red thread? And so on. And finally, at the end, don't forget to submit your sources. That's it. Now, good luck, and I'm looking forward to seeing your writing.